Alright guys, in today's video we have some very interesting PlayStation 5 information to go over and talk about. I'm going to get right into it, but before I do, I'm going to ask you to please consider leaving the video a like if you do end up enjoying it. It really does help it out a lot. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification icon as well, so you can be notified anytime a new video goes live. The first thing we're going to be talking about has to do with the PlayStation 5's IO system, and how it's apparently going to be supercharged by Oodle texture. Now, I know that's a funny name, but this is essentially a new technology, and it seems as though as we go further into the next generation in the future, pretty much all PS5 games, or at least most of them, will be utilizing this technology, and it's going to do some big things for the PS5. It's actually going to allow the bandwidth to potentially go up to 17.38 gigabytes per second, which is insane. So I am going to attempt to explain to you through this article what exactly this technology is and why it's very significant when it comes to the PlayStation 5, and more specifically what developers are going to be able to do with their games because of this, what it's going to enable developers to do. So this article, courtesy of WCCF Tech, starts by, kind of reminding us what industry figures such as, Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney, how he talked about the IO throughput of the PlayStation 5, how it's extremely important and it's going to really do some big things for games in the future. And we also have Mark Cerny letting us know that the console's IO bandwidth is at 5.5 gigabytes per second with uncompressed data and 8 to 9 gigabytes per second with compressed data. So it says here, it looks like the partnership with Oodle will allow the PS5 to go much further when it comes to bandwidth peaks with compressed data. We already knew that the PlayStation 5 would support the Kraken hardware decoder, but the folks at Oodle have now unveiled that Sony also licensed Oodle texture technology, which is optimized for compressing GPU textures. Oodle texture is a software library that game developers use at content creation time to compile their source art into GPU-ready BC1-7 formats. All games use GPU texture encoders, but previous encoders did not optimize the compiled textures for compression like Oodle texture does. Not all games at the launch of the PlayStation 5 will be using Oodle texture, as it's a very new technology, but we expect it to be in the majority of PS5 games in the future. Because of this, we expect the average compression ratio and therefore the effective IO speed to be even better than previously estimated. Kraken is a powerful generic compressor that can find good compression on data with repeated patterns or structure. Some types of data are scrambled in such a way that the compressibility is hard for Kraken to find unless that data is prepared in the right way to put it in a usable form. An important case for this for games is in GPU textures. And so there is a paragraph here that I'm not going to read because it does get pretty technical, but if you are interested, feel free to click on the link down below and read the rest for yourself. But the article does go on to say, according to Oodle, the previous 8 to 9 gigabytes per second IO bandwidth figure that was provided by Sony by multiplying the 5.5 gigabyte per second peak bandwidth of the PS5 SSD for the standard compression ratio of 1.45/1 or 1.64/1. However, when factoring in both Oodle Kraken and Oodle texture, the developers of the technology have seen an impressive compression ratio of 3.16/1 for a texture set in a recent game. This would translate into an IO bandwidth peak of 17.38 gigabytes per second, as mentioned in the headline. Of course, that may not be typical, and not all PS5 games will necessarily take advantage of this technology to the fullest. That said, it does sound like the PlayStation 5 is equipped to remain the leading gaming architecture for quite some time when it comes to I/O. Now, I know that was a lot to take in and a lot to process, and so what you really need to take away from this is that when it comes to the PlayStation 5, the thing that everybody was already very impressed with, and the thing that really stands out, right? We've had moments where we got fixated on the teraflop number, and it was all about the power and the GPU and whatnot. But we know that the PlayStation 5's greatest strength lies within its IO, lies within the architecture, the way it's set up, and that SSD and the speeds that can be achieved. We've heard plenty of developers talk about this in a very positive way and very clearly convey just how significant this is going to be for long-term game development. That just got a lot better. This Oodle texture technology, this partnership, this licensing that Sony is doing is essentially going to allow them to take this even further than we were aware of at this point. And it is important to understand that, as it does say in this article, as their write-up does say, we're not going to see all this happen at one time. It's not like all of these games that are going to come out within the first year or even year and a half of the PlayStation 5 are going to be fully taking advantage of this technology. This is stuff that over time, more and more developers are going to take advantage of. It doesn't sound like it's going to be too difficult. It's something they're going to have to learn, obviously, since it is new technology, but it seems like it's going to be in most, if not all, developers' best interest to do so, because this technology is going to have a huge impact on game development and how they can create their games. How this is essentially allowing, again, as I've said many times before, when it comes to IO throughput and speed and, you know, what does this really mean for games? Well, what it means for games is developers will be able to do things in a much different way. They will be able to kind of rethink how they want to develop their game. They're not going to be developing their future games around these older systems, around these bottlenecks. They're going to have data like instantaneously, and not just a little bit of data, as it says here, up to 17.38 gigabytes per second's worth of data every second at any given moment. Now, that's the peak, obviously, and that's if a developer's taking full advantage of it. So right now we can kind of focus in on Sony's first party and how they're the ones that are going to really be utilizing this technology and leading the way, you would assume, in how this technology can be implemented. They're most likely going to be spearheading this, I don't know what you want to call it exactly, but they're the ones that are going to be spearheading the fundamental shift in some areas of game development, and that's going to be enabled by what Sony has created with the PS5, its architecture, and then also partnering with Oodle Texture here to really kind of put these things together and just allow for things that, you know, we have yet to see. I mean, things that previously weren't possible. Again, this all comes down to Sony creating technology and leveraging technology and partnering with other companies that are clearly, you know, in line with this technology and licensing it to enable developers to do things that just simply have not been done before, that simply were not possible before. A lot of people think that when I say this, I'm attempting to oversell it, and there's no promise. We don't know for sure. This is the hope, right? Like, Sony is building it and they're giving it to the developers, and it's up to the developers and the creators to really kind of push forward. And people have this idea in their head that individuals such as Tim Sweeney and others are just saying these positive things about the PS5 because they were paid to do so, and we know that Sony made a little bit of an investment into Epic. But the reality of the situation is these are game creators. These are individuals who create game engines. They know what the future of game development should be and what it should look like. They know what the next step is going forward in order to allow like the next big evolution in game development. I know I'm going on and on here, and I know that this sounds like, wow, like it's really going to lead to all that. Again, it's going to take some time, but there's a reason why they're saying this is essentially going to supercharge the PlayStation 5's IO system. And as this article does point out at the bottom here, what this ultimately means is that the PlayStation 5, if, you know, everything we're seeing here does actually pan out the way it should, and developers are able to take advantage of it relatively soon, it does sound like the PlayStation 5 will remain the leading gaming architecture for quite some time when it comes to IO. So this was a really important video, in my opinion, for me to make, because it's something that, while we may not see it immediately, right? Like, we're not going to see this necessarily come into play with games such as Demon's Souls at launch or Spider-Man Miles Morales. This is something that Sony's first-party developers, as well as all other developers who are working with the PS5, will have access to. They're going to learn how to use it, but most importantly, they're going to be able to really kind of fundamentally rethink their game design, and that's exciting to me. I mean, I'm excited for next generation. I'm excited for the better graphics, the better frame rates, the ray tracing, the whole deal. But what really excites me is when you think about 3 years from now, 4 years from now, what is this going to enable developers to do? The people who are at the forefront of game creation and really trying to push the boundaries of like what's next, what's beyond just better looking games, what's beyond ray tracing. And that's what gets me excited. And I am very happy to relay this information as well, because this is proof here that Sony really is trying to think about the long term. They're trying to think about how can we alter game design. This is why Mark Cerny should get a lot of credit, because he wasn't just thinking about how do we make the most powerful console? How do we have the most T-flops? And I'm not taking shots at Microsoft because, they're doing their thing. But Mark Cerny is a creator. He's a creative. He has a creative mind. When he was creating the architecture alongside many other people who, probably don't get as much credit as they should, this was kind of, the thing that he was keeping at the forefront of his mind is how do we really meaningfully push forward? How do we truly innovate? How do we truly create a generational leap? And in my opinion, this is how you do it. We're seeing it right before us. So I'm going to end the video here before I continue to keep rambling on. I was meant to talk about more than one topic in this video, but this one just seemed to take up all the time. I don't want it to be too long. So let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. I will be very interested to see what you have to say. Make sure you leave this video a like, again, if you did enjoy it or found it informative. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and haven't already. Hit the bell notification icon so you never miss an upload, and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.